How it is 420 Army, it's your boy Liam. How it is, guys and gals, it's your boy Liam 2020. Oh, the wrong channel. I try to have it different on channels, but either way, this one we're talking about why the Santa Claus films, which I do have those. I have the Santa Claus 3 movie collection. And honestly, I think the second one is kind of funny. Obviously, if you haven't seen these movies, they're with Tim Allen, basically Scott Calvin, which is who Tim Allen is. He's an ad executive working at some, I forget, at some company and then he goes home to his ex-wife, and he's then takes his son Charlie out, and then accidentally causes Santa Claus to fall off the roof, and then has to fill in his role to put on his jacket. But then throughout the movie, Scott eventually gets used to the Christmas routine, and finally is happy being with Santa Claus. The second Santa Claus is about Scott trying to find the Mrs. Claus, which apparently they didn't read. And first time I watched this, I was like, wait, how the fuck is Charlie Scott's son if he's not married? He's like, oh, right, his ex-wife. So basically, Bernard, the head elf, tells Scott that he needs to find the Mrs. Claus. That was the Claus that he missed after the original Santa fell off his roof. So then Scott basically has 27 days to find a wife, or else he can't continue being Santa anymore. And he's even surprised to see that Charlie's on the naughty list. So basically, meanwhile, we cut to Charlie, who's basically goes in through the roof at his school. And apparently he fucking hates the principal, Carol Newman. He sprays a bunch of graffiti. He sprays a graffiti message in the gym, but then Principal Newman catches him. You know, he did see the ladder, but he didn't climb out in time. And there's this girl that he was with. So then Scott gets a cloning machine. Well, it's sort of like a cloning machine, but they tested it on a rat on accident. And it's like, holy shit, this cloning machine actually works. So Scott jumps into the machine, clones himself, and decides to use that to keep in charge of the elves always looking for a wife. So then Scott heads to see his ex-wife and Neil, which is the guy that his ex-wife is dating. And then he's then called to Charlie's school to talk about it. Talk about Santa. I mean, no, not Santa, but Charlie causing havoc. And then Scott even explains it to his ex-wife and Neil that he has to find a wife or else he won't be able to be Santa Claus anymore. So then Charlie is caught again when he spray paints graffiti on the lockers. And back up at the North Pole, the Santa Claus clone, the Scott clone, starts literally taking the Santa rules too seriously, and literally everything he sees, he's like, Jesus, this isn't nice. He literally starts putting everyone on the naughty list, and he even makes soldiers for clones. Meanwhile, Scott's ex-wife sets him up on a few dates, but none of them work. And it was even stated that Scott took 3 years to kiss his ex-wife. Like, damn. I can't even get a damn girlfriend in that period. Let alone a fucking wife. So then Scott, and after Charlie sends to community service, Scott has a date with Principal Newman and uses some of his magic. And also he took Comet with him to get down there. And then he heads to like a meeting where it's like a Christmas party and uses his Santa magic to give everyone the thing they always wanted as a kid. It's like, oh, that's so sweet. Principal Newman got like this doll she wanted. It's like, pfft. Yeah. I honestly can't remember what I wanted when I was a kid. Like, if I want, I don't know. But yeah, he even uses it when they're sledding. But he then uses up all his magic, and he has to get home some way somehow. So then Scott's niece ends up losing it. So then Curtis is losing a tooth, and after Curtis comes back to tell them that the Santa clone is taking everything too seriously, and Scott has to get home, they find out that Comet is super duper fat because Scott's knees overfed him. This is so clones. I am nuts so for cloning. I'm pretty much nuts for clones in films. So then they decide to. So then after Scott's niece loses a tooth after a few failed attempts of trying to rip out a tooth from Scott's mouth, and after he gets kicked out from his date with Principal Newman after saying that he is Santa Claus, and then Principal Newman's like, "Get the fuck out of my house! You take my childhood belief too seriously." And then Charlie talks to Principal Newman the next day about it. And also they ended up... And also in the scene when the Tooth Fairy comes in to grab the tooth, you can see a Kim Possible poster in the background. That's clever. And then... Actually, at first the Tooth Fairy doesn't even recognize Scott. And he's like, "Who the fuck are you?" It's like, "I'm Santa Claus. We agreed to change your name to the Molinator." And he's like, "Oh yeah, now I remember." So then they all get back to North Pole, where the Santa clone has made freaking toy soldiers to sustain the elves. So then Scott and Curtis get back to North Pole, but they end up getting captured by the extra large soldiers. What the fuck is with these soldiers? So then, and it looks like they're fucked, but then Principal Newman and Charlie show up to get them all out. All the elves defeat the soldiers, and yeah. And then Charlie decides, no, not Charlie, Scott. Charlie gets his tooth back, but then Scott eventually gets Principal Newman to become Mrs. Claus, and he's saved. They can continue being Santa. That's why the second one is so good with clones and like love interests. Yeah, sort of this love struck is kind of cliched, but actually not how it's portrayed here. Shark Tale was stupid, and pretty much every other film I've seen where, I don't know. But either way, the third Santa Claus is really shitty. It's like a Cars 2 kind of bad. Basically, it's Jack Frost, as Martin Short, basically altering the timeline where Scott wishes he had never been Santa and sees what would have happened if that happened. But yeah, let me know in the comments what Santa Claus movie is your favorite. If it's the second or the first, honestly, the second one is kind of like the funniest, like my favorite out of the three. So yeah, that's basically it. Another Christmas movie, which is a Christmas film that I enjoyed it, but I'll probably eventually tackle my three favorites, which are National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Elf, and Arthur Christmas. Those are my three favorite Christmas movies of all time. I watch those multiple times every Christmas season. And yeah, and yes, they didn't, but yeah, please like, sub, and peace.